Friends, I'm in China. They're building structures that are exact replicas of Soviet buildings. I can imagine the Chinese must be frustrated. They hired an architect who was supposed to create something unique. Instead, he builds a typical Soviet 5-story house. They hang party slogans everywhere. Thanks to the party for this amazing airport. The red line of communist ideology runs through every aspect of life here. You see party slogans posted almost everywhere, even in the toilets. Naturally, you can't just stroll around China without bumping into a red corner. Here's one showcasing the achievements of the Chinese Communist Party. There's Comrade Xi Jinping and some important stuff to make sure people walking by don't forget where the light and fortune come from. The public restroom in Chengdu, like in Beijing, is spotless. There's a designated person who cleans and polishes everything, keeping it all in order. And speaking of ideology, you encounter propaganda posters from the Communist Party literally everywhere. You can't even go to the bathroom without reading an important slogan. Behind me is a public toilet, and in front of it, a sign that says, "Through joint efforts, comprehensively build a modern socialist country and fully promote the great revival of the Chinese nation." So, as you head to the restroom, you're soaking in these important ideas. These posters and slogans pop up in the most unexpected places. For example, this morning, I just went into a shop to buy some water and came across an interesting poster. It said, "Let's not forget the original mission. Let's go together with the party." Apparently, people started forgetting a bit. And then, Comrade Xi came and reminded everyone which way to go. The second line on the poster reads, "Socialist service warms people's hearts. So, you can go in for cigarettes or water, and they remind you that socialist service warms your heart." And it's hard to disagree, especially when there's a camera watching you from every corner, from every appliance. Yes, you can only be grateful to live in such a wonderful country as Great China. To get into the party spirit and history, I decided to visit a museum dedicated to the First Congress. Artem Zhdarnov brought me here. He lives in Shanghai and runs an online publication about China. These are some party museums. The exhibition hall of the very first Congress of the Chinese Communist Party. The people have decided to fully embrace the party's ideas. In China, all landmarks are rated by letters, and a 5A rating is like earning 3 Michelin stars. It's a landmark where every tourist group is taken by coach. It means it's a top-tier attraction. It's a must-see. If workers from a factory are on tour to Shanghai, visiting all 5A-rated sites is mandatory. There's a souvenir shop on the left where you can find party-themed souvenirs. Now look at this door, number 106. What is that? It can't just be regular water. Even the ice cream is branded, shaped like this door. In fact, that's this exact museum. You can see workers coming out of this door here. Well, this is where that Congress took place, 1921. That's the year the party was founded. In short, at this very address, the guys got together and established the party 100 years ago. Of course, the country's history started long before the communists came to power. China is one of the oldest civilizations in the world. Scientists believe it could be as old as 5,000 years. For a long time, China was an empire with a history of changing dynasties. The last dynasty ruled until the 20th century, when a series of uprisings shook the country. One of these uprisings turned into a revolution. The monarchy was overthrown, and China was declared a republic. The Communist Party of China was founded in 1921, but it didn't immediately come to power. For several decades, the Communists battled the right-wing conservative Kuomintang Party. Finally, in 1949, after the Civil War and World War II, the communists emerged victorious. The party was led by one of its founders, Mao Zedong. The regime established a totalitarian communist system in the country and was responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of people. One of the darkest chapters of communist rule was the Cultural Revolution. During this period, up to 2 million people lost their lives. The Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution was a decade-long period of chaos. Mao Zedong's power had been severely undermined by the Great Famine of the 1950s and 60s. Those dissatisfied with Mao's policies began forming an opposition, which included figures like Liu Shaoqi, the chairman of the People's Republic of China. He openly questioned the validity of Mao Zedong's policies. Mao then decided to take revenge, using the Chinese masses to regain control of the Communist Party. Essentially, Mao's decision to launch the revolution in May 1966 was an attempt to eliminate his enemies by turning the people against the party. When mass mobilization began, party newspapers described it as an epical struggle that would breathe new life into the cause of socialism. In reality, the Cultural Revolution damaged the economy, ruined millions of lives, and plunged China into 10 years of turmoil, bloodshed, famine, and stagnation. Gangs of students and Red Guards attacked people in bourgeois clothing on the streets, tore down imperialist signs, and party officials were killed or driven to suicide. After the violence ran its bloody course, the country's leaders acknowledged that it was a disaster, bringing only chaos, destruction, and regression. In September 1967, with many cities on the brink of anarchy, Mao sent in the army to restore order. Yet, his party has now ruled the country for more than 70 years. Many Chinese even travel to the place where the first Congress was held. By the way, remember the souvenirs of the door I showed you at the beginning? This is the very door behind which the first party meeting was held. It's the legendary 106th door, and it's from here that the delegates of the first Congress of the Chinese Communist Party emerged. That's right, look at this. Now it's a pilgrimage site. Everyone is taking pictures in front of this door. See how many people are posing with the door? The kids are clearly well behaved, although they're not sure which hand they're supposed to salute with, but that's okay. There's a girl with a badge of the hammer and sickle on her chest. She came here specifically to recharge her energy. Later, these photos could be uploaded to the local Tinder, where she could find a successful husband, perhaps a party worker. There are a lot of people here, and this isn't even a tourist group. So these are just people who came to take pictures and photograph their children in front of this magical, holy door. The address doesn't really exist anymore. There used to be 100 Wanji Lu Street, but it's gone. Now it's Xinyi Lu Street, house number 76. So these aren't the original addresses, they're no longer there. And here are the real party values next to the holy door. A Virtu store. I was sure these guys had gone bankrupt, but apparently in China, there are still customers willing to buy overpriced, uncomfortable phones. These legendary super expensive bricks with crocodile leather are still being sold. And here's beautiful Hong Kong jewelry. And gold, lots of gold. So what does a party functionary need to do when arriving in Shanghai? Touch the door, take a picture, and buy himself a phone made of gold, so he won't be ashamed to return home. You can also find posters with party slogans in the library. I'm currently in the Guangzhou Library, a landmark of modern architecture. If you look up, it's featured in many architecture books. It's an architectural highlight of the city. But when you go inside, it's typical China. The architects designed the building, the builders construct it, everything is clean and nice. Then a party worker comes in and says, "How come we don't have a stand with flowers behind a fence? That's not right." So they put in a magnificent composition right in the center of the hall. It's written as a dedication, apparently, to the people who visit the library, inherit civilization, and serve the community. The library is an important symbol of the nation's cultural development and a significant place for nourishing the soul and fostering cultural self-confidence. Who else can say it so beautifully? Only Google Translate could manage such a poetic translation. Naturally, it's impossible to imagine any public place without a portrait of Lei Feng. Lei Feng, one of China's main heroes, is the man with the ear flap hat. Let me tell you a little more about who Lei Feng is. This guy with the iconic ear flap hat is an example of how young people should be educated in the communist spirit. Lei Feng was born in 1940 into a poor peasant family. During the Second Sino-Japanese War, his parents died, leaving him an orphan. From a young age, the boy was devoted to the party. First, Lei Feng joined the Young Pioneers, then became a member of the Communist Youth League, and finally joined the ranks of the People's Liberation Army of China. In 1962, Lei Feng died when a telegraph pole fell on him. After his death, a diary was found where the 21-year-old wrote about his admiration for Mao Zedong and his dedication to building communism in China. Nowadays, young people aren't particularly interested in Lei Feng's ideas. Nevertheless, his heroic image is still displayed everywhere in China. You can even find stands with stories about the party at Beijing airport. As soon as you set foot on Chinese soil, you're already expected to absorb the spirit of ideology. Well, friends, here we are in an amazing place. This is Daxing Airport, Beijing's new super airport, which opened just before the COVID pandemic. It's clear that it was empty for some time, but now the airport is slowly coming back to life. This airport deserves attention because it's incredibly beautiful. Designed by Zaha Hadid Studio, you can see all these amazing lines, the ceiling, some columns, and skylights. Everything is so organic, creating a fantastic space. It's very beautiful, and you just want to take pictures of this airport. Well, in fact, friends, this, you could say, is the new heart of the airport. Because building a stunningly beautiful airport is not enough, it's not enough to create this marvel. You also need to properly sell its story. And what better way to highlight the party's achievements than through these impressive patriotic displays? So, it says here that the airport opened in 2019. During its construction, which took 5 years, Comrade Xi visited the site twice. He personally inaugurated it and delivered very warm remarks during the opening, stating that this is an important achievement of the Communist Party of China. This airport, you could say, became one of the jewels in the crown of modern China during the centennial celebrations of the founding of the Communist Party. You look at these stunning vaults, the skylights illuminating the departure hall. It's simply beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Thanks to the party for this amazing airport. Oh, and it says right here that red is the color of revolution. Yellow represents the forces of revolution, and the 5 stars, these 5 stars right here, are like fireworks in the sky. Just amazing. You walk around and marvel at all these wonders, and it makes your heart rejoice. I'm actually not being ironic. Okay, I might be a bit ironic about the party, but the airport is genuinely impressive, and the patriotic inserts that the Communist Party added inside this ultra-modern building are quite amusing. They built such a cutting-edge airport regardless, and I think it would be very cool if they invited some top-notch modern designers to decorate all these patriotic stands as well. You know, make the hammer and sickle look futuristic, so everything would be just as stylish as the architecture of this airport, and then it would be absolutely fantastic. Mao Zedong led China for more than 30 years. When Mao was in power, he brutally cracked down on oppositionists. More than 500,000 people suffered from his repression. Mao Zedong is also known for his Great Leap Forward policy. He aimed to transform China from an entirely agrarian society into an industrial one. During this time, factories appeared all over China, staffed by people without knowledge or experience. There wasn't enough time or energy left for agriculture, and as a result, China was struck by famine. Estimates suggest that between 15 and 55 million people died because of it. Mao himself died in 1976. The leading party felt it necessary to assess his rule and address his mistakes. The party concluded that Mao was 70% right and 30% wrong. The current leadership of the country adheres to the same assessment, but ordinary Chinese citizens have a different attitude towards the leader. According to the New York Times, today's Chinese youth fully support Mao's views, including his thoughts on the vast social inequality in China. Young Chinese are reading books about Mao and creating online clubs where they discuss his works. This is very interesting, by the way. We're shown that there used to be an ancient palace of the Shu Kingdom here, ancient Sichuan province, and in 1968, the Sichuan Revolution Committee and various mass organizations decided to demolish the imperial city and build an exhibition hall. This is the photo that was left. Many events in Chinese history resonate remarkably with the history of the Soviet Union, where we will build a new world. The old imperial city was demolished. The palace was torn down. An exhibition hall was built, and a 30-meter-high monument to Mao was erected. Here is the exhibition hall and the monument to Mao. He's waving his hand, just like our grandfather Lenin. Historians believe that the formation and development of Chinese communism would not have been possible without the help of Russian Bolsheviks. Many of them came to China in the early 20th century to spread their ideology. Even after the Chinese Communist Party came to power, it was supported by Stalin. He followed all events in China closely and asked Mao to write to him on any issue. Mao and Stalin even met in person. The Chinese leader visited Moscow between December 1949 and February 1950. Together with Stalin, they discussed cooperation between the two parties and a $300 million loan to China and assistance in building a navy. Stalin did not make a return visit, but many Soviet specialists came to China. They helped rebuild the country after the war and revolution, and at the same time, built several exhibition centers in China as a sign of friendship. Alright friends, let's talk about Soviet architecture in Beijing. There's quite a bit of it actually, and Soviet-style buildings can be grouped into different categories. First, there are quintessential Soviet buildings designed by Soviet architects themselves. The best example of this is the Beijing Exhibition Center, which you can see right behind me. It was originally called the Soviet Exhibition Center. This building was unveiled in 1954, intended to showcase to China what it should aspire to. At the time, the Soviet Union was the big brother, and China looked to it for inspiration, whether in achievements, culture, or architecture. When the building opened in 1954, it was strikingly similar to the grand, Stalinist structures of the era. Think of the monumental buildings at Moscow's Vanda Park, or some other somber maritime terminals of the time. These references to Soviet architecture are unmistakable. The building was designed by Viktor Andreev, and when it was first constructed, it proudly bore the Soviet coat of arms. Nowadays, you'll see just 2 pigeons in its place. Take a look at the colonnade, 18 columns on each side. Today, they're just flanked by advertisements for the business inside. Back then, the columns were adorned with the emblems of the Soviet republics. However, by 1958, only 4 years later, the friendship between China and the Soviet Union started to fracture. The exhibition center was rebranded as the Beijing Exhibition Center, distancing itself from its Soviet origins, but the architecture remains. The red star, so familiar to anyone from the Soviet era, still sits atop the building. Speaking of Viktor Andreev, he didn't just design this building in Beijing. He also created an exhibition center in Shanghai. On top of that, he designed a Soviet hotel in Yangon, Myanmar, which I've mentioned before when talking about that country. In Moscow, Andreev is known for his design of the Cosmos Hotel. Here's another fascinating building in Moscow designed by Viktor Andreev: the Embassy of the People's Republic of China in Russia. It was constructed in 1957, and there's an interesting story behind it. After the completion of that grand, elegant building, with its tall spire in Beijing, the Chinese were captivated. They looked at it with genuine admiration and were very impressed with the design. So, they asked him to design their embassy in Moscow, expecting it to be just as pompous, ornate, and majestic. Something along the lines of the lavishly Stalinist Russian embassy in Berlin today. However, by 1957, Khrushchev had already come to power, and with him came a new era of fighting against architectural excess and over-decoration. So instead of another grandiose building, Andreev designed something very plain, simple, and frankly unattractive for the Chinese embassy. I can only imagine how disappointed the Chinese were. They hired an architect expecting a masterpiece, and instead they got a basic Khrushchev box. It's quite a story. Meanwhile, in Beijing, that beautiful Soviet-style exhibition center still stands. They say there's even a Russian restaurant inside. Interestingly, older Beijingers may remember that when the building first opened, many people came to see it as a glimpse into what the future China might look like. The Soviet Union used this space to showcase its achievements, displaying everything from tractors and combines to architectural projects demonstrating the power of the Stalinist USSR. The Soviet Union was showing China what it should strive for. Back then, Beijingers came to envision China's future. Today, China has far surpassed the Soviet Union, but this building still serves as a reminder of the friendship that once was. I wonder who used to stand on that pedestal outside. Perhaps a statue of Lenin or some other Soviet hero, now long gone without a replacement. Oh, and here's an interesting fact for you. In Russia, this kind of architecture is known as Stalinist Empire style. In China, they simply call it Su, meaning Soviet. In the 1950s, China began building socialist cities, and the communist leadership wanted to surpass the grandeur of imperial structures. The Stalinist Empire style was the perfect fit for this goal. Behind me, you can see the Shanghai Exhibition Center, which bears a striking resemblance to the main pavilion of Moscow's Vandha. Nowadays, various exhibitions are held here, allowing visitors to admire this entirely unique architecture. It's like a small corner of the Soviet Union, nestled among the surrounding glass skyscrapers, all of it designed by Soviet architects. The ruby star still crowns its golden spire, perched atop the tower. In general, everything here looks very familiar to someone with a Soviet background. By the way, take a look at this sculpture of a worker. Originally, there were two workers here, one Soviet and one Chinese. But when the Soviet Union and China had their fallout, the sculpture was altered, and only one Chinese worker remained. No more symbolism of friendship. This kind of thing isn't typical for China. However, as you can see, they've preserved its original interiors. They didn't remodel anything, even though they were probably tempted to. You can tell that even the doors are the same old ones. Usually the Chinese like to tear out the interiors and do some modern renovations like Euro-style makeovers, but here it seems the original interiors were lucky enough to survive. Wow, this place is a real testament to the Soviet-Chinese friendship. It's like a blast from the past, just like the old Cosmos Pavilion. Originally, this was the largest pavilion, serving as the Pavilion of Industry. Now it's just one of many exhibition halls. Interestingly, there's meat hanging right in the exhibit. People are touching it, maybe even tasting it. So what kind of meat is this? It looks pretty good. Apparently, the people from that province, known for its sunsets and windmills, according to the photos, brought it here. And clearly, also for its good meat. You can see folks shooting TikToks, talking about what's going on. Subscribe and like, says the guy in the cap. Exhibition centers aren't the only reminders of the close relationship between China and the USSR. Walking around Beijing, I stumbled into a Soviet-style courtyard. It's incredible. Look, this really feels like a typical Soviet neighborhood in Beijing. 5-story buildings with metal bars installed on the windows to expand the living space. The buildings look quite unattractive now, but what can you do when you're trying to gain a little extra square footage in a city with expensive real estate like Beijing's? When I first arrived in China and noticed these barred balconies, I wondered why they put bars on windows, especially on the 5th or 6th floors of high-rise buildings. I couldn't find a clear answer, but there are a few theories. One is that people are trying to create a bit more space in their apartments. By installing large extended metal grates, they create a little nook where they can store small things. Place flower pots, or even keep a bird cage. Sure, you can't fit a car tire in there, but you can stash away some smaller items. In this way, people squeeze out just a little more room. There may even be some DIY construction projects here and there. In my country, people sometimes go as far as adding whole extra rooms to their apartments. I haven't seen that in China yet, but maybe that's because I usually travel in big cities, where things are relatively orderly. In the provinces, who knows what you might find? At least in Beijing, expanding your apartment, however modestly, seems to be solved by adding bars to the windows. If you take a closer look at these balconies with their metal bars, you can see how people are carving out a little extra space for themselves. Some folks even use these extensions to dry their laundry behind the grates. But this particular building is more of an exception. In Beijing, especially on facades facing the street, things tend to be kept in better order. Still, when you look at these 5-story buildings, they feel oddly familiar. I'm trying to pinpoint what exactly feels so home-like about them. They're not just the typical Soviet-style panel blocks we had back home, though. Instead, these buildings are made from a concrete frame filled with brick. But the general format, the colors, and overall look would be instantly recognizable to anyone from the Soviet Union. The courtyard itself is pretty cluttered. Along the facade, there's a lot of garbage and propaganda signs, like one that says, "Give up your place to elders." Beautification is rare in China, especially in open courtyards, like this one. It's something you'd typically only see in more closed-off areas. Still, here you can see some attempts at landscaping. They've got trash bins, but they look filthy, stink, and aren't covered. There's it all looks really creepy. You shouldn't do things like that. But overall, the yard isn't very tidy. This is right in the center of Beijing, and the apartments here aren't cheap, and you can see the access system through cameras. The door is open now, but everywhere there are intercoms that record and identify people through an app. Everything is automated. They've already spotted me. Who's entered our yard? We don't know this person. They don't live here. So, I'd better leave the yard quickly. Although the cameras have already caught me and sent the footage to whoever needed it. In the 1980s, China went through massive changes. The ruling Communist Party began to allow private production. A flood of foreign investment came into the country. Party leader Deng Xiaoping aimed to transform the economy and raise the standard of living. His ideas laid the foundation for socialism with Chinese characteristics. This approach allows China to maintain a market economy. Since the late 20th century, China has gradually become one of the most powerful nations in the world. As part of its openness policy, the government started expanding with the economy. One such experiment was the city of Shenzhen. While bread and electricity were still rationed elsewhere in China, Shenzhen was already using money. Now, Shenzhen ranks among the most technologically advanced cities in the world. It produces 90% of the world's household appliances. Factories like Huawei and Lenovo are located here. The local electronics market sells all kinds of components. By the way, in the 20th century, Guangzhou was the site of several armed uprisings led by communists. Perhaps that is why there is a whole bar with ideological literature in the city. And this amazing place is called the Red Book Bar. It's got Xi Jinping's books and ideas. There's most important literature inside. You can borrow it for free and read it here. Let's start with the second volume. There were many important things that we wanted to do in the past, but could not accomplish. Because of this, we have made historic achievements for the party and the state. A historic transformation has taken place, and socialism with Chinese characteristics has entered a new era. It's fascinating. Anyway, there are many books here that tell the story of Xi Jinping's life journey. Most of the books are in Chinese, but as we can see, the main book has been translated into different languages. This is the Constitution of the Communist Party of China. And here's a white book next to it that's very useful. This is the Regulations of the Communist Party of China on disciplinary penalties. What it says here, the China-themed book fair is an important window for understanding contemporary China, a key to finding answers to China's questions, exploring ideas, strengthening party spirit, emphasizing practice and creating new ones, pioneering innovators, overcome difficulties, and live for the good of the people. So we're being led by a red thread somewhere, to understanding modern China, a great anti-epidemic spirit. Life above all else. The whole country has one heart. Where does this red thread lead us? The spirit of two bombs and one soulmate. Love of country, selfless dedication, self-confidence, hard work. The connection is getting worse for the translator. It doesn't end, okay. It would be a shame if we went all the way to the parking lot. The spirit of May 4th, patriotic, progressive, democratic science. Realistically, it's an exit to the parking lot. I mean, I was hoping there'd be some kind of museum downstairs. Something amazing. Beautiful. This is just an underground parking. In general, reading all these important quotations, slogans, walking around this red thread, I was sure there was a table downstairs and some man in a leather coat would accept you into the party because you've already gone all the way down, learned the truth, and all that's left downstairs is to sign your name and get your badge with a sickle and hammer, and downstairs is just a parking lot. It's such a beautiful building. It happens like this. You're walking along, not touching anyone, and there's this amazing building with such an interesting design. There's a flower with a hammer and sickle on it, and inside is party literature. Communist Party slogans, quotes, principles. There's a lot of literature about Xi Jinping. Look, how the Chinese have learned to sell their ideology. This is how China promotes communism within the country. In the next video, I'll take you through some of China's historical landmarks that left me quite puzzled. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a kind comment. Also, feel free to share this video on Reddit and send the link to your friends via WhatsApp.